This video is going to go over some of the helpful features built into VS Code that you can use when you're doing your work in CS-102. At this point, you should have Visual Studio Code and the Live Server extension installed and working. You can follow along with this video or read the text down below. So to start with, Visual Studio Code is a folder-based project tool. And so that means that it requires all the files to be in a single folder so that it can access them all together. I have a folder here for all the work I'm going to do in CS-102. When I go inside this folder, all I have at this point is the starter kit zip file. I'm going to start by unzipping that. And that is going to create a new folder here with the same name, and inside that folder are the two starter files. Before I get started, I'm going to rename this so that I can remember what is inside this folder. As class progresses, I will have multiple folders here, so make sure and give them a good name so that you can remember what is what. Okay, so going inside this folder where I'm going to be working today, there's one thing that I notice here. You may see this on your computer, and if you do, you need to make one change to your Windows system, and that is that the file extensions are being hidden. So we can see that there's a file here called index. It's got a browser icon. The type over here says it's HTML. There's another one, style. It's got a different icon. It's a cascading style sheet. That all looks good. But it looks like there are no file extensions here. They are actually there, but Windows is hiding them. So as a developer, and particularly as someone working in CS-102, you're going to need to see those to make sure you're seeing the same files and that you're submitting the correct files. So in order to do that on Windows, in your File Explorer, click on the View tab, and over here under Show and Hide, you need to check this box. So now we can see the .html and the .css here. Now we can see everything about this file and know what they are. Visual Studio Code won't care whether they are visible or not, but it is important for you so that when you are submitting your files that you can see what files are there and make sure that they are all there the way you want them to be. Okay, so now I'm going to start Visual Studio Code, and I'm going to start it with this project folder that I created with the files that I want to begin working on. There's two ways that I can do this. The first is by right-clicking and select Open with Code. It'll be somewhere in this context menu. For me, it's right here. And when I click on it, Visual Studio Code is going to open. There it is. And it opened that folder and is showing me over here in the Explorer, its little Explorer window, the files that are in that folder. Now, if I were to already have Visual Studio Code open and I wanted to open another folder and start working on something else, I could close it and then do that right-click again. But I can also just open it from here within Visual Studio Code. And to do that, I can go to File, Open Folder, and then I can navigate around to whichever folder I want to open. In this case, I will select this one and select Open or Select Folder, and it now, although you couldn't see it because I already had it open, it now opened this folder up for me to work on. So at this point, I'm ready to get to work. And the first thing I'm going to want to do here is to start Live Server so that I can see the changes that I'm making. So in order to do that, I'm going to open an HTML file. In these first few projects, you're just going to have one or maybe two HTML files, but eventually you're going to have multiple ones, and one of them is going to be your main HTML. In this case, it's index.html, so I'm going to open that. You may need to double click on it to make sure that it's open, if it doesn't open up or if it opens up and disappears. And then to start Live Server, I can right-click and open Live Server. Now, this is in the documentation, but I'm not going to demonstrate this anywhere else. Just notice here that I've got an option I can click, but it also gives me a shortcut. So if you find that you're doing a lot of opening live server, stopping live server, maybe write down or memorize these shortcuts, and then you can do the same thing without having to right click. You can basically do it from the keyboard instead of having to click and use your mouse to do these things. You see there's lots of shortcuts for different things. Some of my favorites include save. So I can go click File and Save, but I can also just type Control and S at the same time, and my changes will be saved. That'll be important here in a second once we get Live Server going. So let's start Live Server. Okay, it is going to open up a web browser. You can see it open there on the right side of my screen, and it's going to render that HTML page and any of the styles in the style.css in the browser for me. Now things are a little crowded here, so I'm going to do one more, and this is a Windows trick. If you're using a different system, you might not be able to do this, but I've got two windows that are kind of stepping on top of each other. So I'm going to ask Windows to let me arrange them side by side. I think it's called tiling. It's going to put them next to each other and fill the screen. So I'm going to type Windows and then the left arrow button. Oops, I have to have that selected. Windows and left arrow button, and you can see it scrunched it over halfway. And as soon as I let go of the Windows button, it's showing me all the other things I have open and letting me pick one to put over here on the right side. So I'm going to pick the browser, and it pops it over on the right side. And now these are, it looks a little weird, but they are both filling half the screen, and I can see the two of them together. I like a little bit more room over here, so I'm going to make this smaller. Now that these two are tiled, I can grab right in between them and resize both of them. I'm going to make them about that big, and then VS Code went over and filled out the rest of the space. So I don't really need them 50-50. I want to see more what's going on here, and then I will just see the results as I save changes. Now with Live Server running, I can make modifications here to my HTML file, and as soon as I save it, those changes are going to be reloaded or re-rendered over here in the browser for me. So let's just do that. Let's put in another, we'll put in H3. Okay, so you can see that it's here. Nothing's changed over here, but I have a change in my code, but this little white bubble up here on the tab, or you can see it up here in the editor too, indicates I have an unsaved change. So although I've typed it in the editor, it's not been saved to the file, and Live Server is not aware of it. So as soon as I save, and again I can do File Save, but I'm not going to. I'm going to go Control S. As soon as I save it, the bubble goes away and Live Server updates my browser. This is going to save quite a bit of time as you are making changes to your file. Particularly if you're experimenting a little bit, you can put in a change, save it, and then instantly see how it looked. If you're not happy with it, you can Control Z or remove it or change it, save, and see how it happened. Or see what happened as a result. And that change not only includes things here in the HTML, but in style as well. So let's say here in the style, I want to make a change. I'm just going to make it straight blue. As soon as I save, you can see that the browser updated as well. That is a pretty dark background, so maybe I will put it back to light blue, Control Z, save again, and now I'm back to where I started. Now, once you're done working on your project and you're going to close everything down or switch to another project, you'll want to close Live Server. We can see that it's running. In fact, one of the ways I can tell it's running is right down here on the bottom. This indicates that the Live Server is running. It's running on network port 5500, which we can also see right here. We see this 5500. That's correlation between the two. So when I'm all done for the day, I'm going to right-click in my HTML, right-click, and stop Live Server. Okay, and now we can see this changed. This no longer shows a port number. This is still here. The browser doesn't know that Live Server stopped. However, any changes that are made will not be reflected in the browser anymore. So as soon as I save that, you can see nothing changed here. So these are now disconnected. If while you're working, you have this problem where you're saving changes but nothing is happening, just look down here and see maybe live server's not running. Um, Little power user tip: to start live server, you can also just click on this thing. It's going to open a new browser tab, so you can see I still have the old one here that's not working anymore. I should just close it. And I have the new one with the change. If I Control Z here and put my H3 back in, then we're back in business, and you can see the live servers running. So just make sure before you close everything up, at the end of working on an assignment, click down here, or you can always right click and stop live server, whatever, and then make sure, of course, everything is saved and that you can close your browser tab, close VS Code and such. Now, while VS Code is a text editor and it can be used to edit any kind of text file, it was made specifically for web developers. So it has a lot of smarts and awareness of HTML, CSS, and lots of other web technologies built right in. So that's one of the reasons we're using this in this class, and it's a reason that it's actually a very popular editor for web developers and developers in general to work on their projects, because it has shortcuts and some pretty cool features built into it. I'm going to show you a couple of them that I think you'll need in class, but you can look around between looking at the options you have in the menu and Googling. You can find all kinds of cool things that this does. Okay, so the first thing, and you may have seen this when I was making this change earlier, is Visual Studio Code knows about HTML elements like the H1, H3, all those things. It knows about them, and so it can be a little helpful when you're creating something new. So I'm going to put in an H5. So when I start, I type the opening brace, H5, and the closing brace. As soon as I do that, or not the closing brace, but the ending brace there. As soon as I did that, it created the closing H5 tag for me. It knew or guessed what I was doing and then assumed I was going to need that at some point. So it just added it, left the cursor in the middle, and now I can put whatever text I wanted to put in this H5. Okay, and I save. Okay, I saved, but I don't have live server running. So let me start live server, get a new tab. There we go. There's the even smaller. I better close this one so I don't get confused. And so it's helping me by at least creating the closing tag for me. Now, in addition to that, there's a kind of an odd thing that web developers have used for a long time to help design the formatting, the layout, kind of the look and feel of their web pages before they have all the content. And this is called lorem ipsum. There's some information on the page and a link to a Wikipedia article if you're interested. But basically, there is a way to add a bunch of kind of gibberish text that looks like a bunch of words in a paragraph into your web page, just so you can see what it's going to look like over there in the browser. Later on, when you get the actual information as a web developer, you would go put that in. But for right now, just while you're laying things out, kind of getting started, you can use this lorem ipsum feature to just see what things are going to look like. So let me show you how that works. I'm going to create a paragraph tag here. And there I got the closing tag. Thank you, VS Code. And now there's a shortcut in here. When I start typing lorem, you can see this little pop-up here is telling me it has some help if I want it. Now I can either click on it or I can hit tab. But before I do, I need to add one more thing. This is going to add a bunch of gibberish words in this paragraph tag for me, but I need to tell it how many words. So I'm going to I'm going to type 25, and I'm going to hit tab. And there are, I'm not going to count them, but that looks like about 25 gibberish words that have been added between my paragraph tags. And so as soon as I save, we can see the paragraph appears over in the browser. If I do that again, but with a bigger number here, okay, and I'll do 200. Oops, I think they need to be all scrunched together. And hit Tab. You can see that it added, it looks like 200 words, one very large paragraph. And when I save, then we see that over here. So this is a tool that's been used for a very long time just to see what the text is going to look like, how it's going to lay out, how it's going to flow on the page. This was actually started by typesetters, and web developers have added it to the technologies that we use to be able to do the same kind of thing. So later on, if I'm happy with the color, the font, the way the text flows, all the arrangement on the page here, if I'm happy with that, then I can save it. And as soon as I get the actual information, then I would just go in here and remove this and put the actual text in. And I already know pretty much what it's going to look like. So it's kind of a nice feature that you may use as you're building your web pages for this class. So that is basically it for just a few of the thousands of features that Visual Studio Code has. I think these are a few that you will use pretty regularly in this class, and then also if you go on to other programming type classes, you may use them there as well.